Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
My name is Cipta Fitriaji. My study numbers is 222, 22, 000, and 47. Here I am going to present my research about the significance of language mixing and code switching in a virtual space for English language teaching. So first, the background. The background is the first introduction. Language is very diverse, and in very many cultures there are many different cultures, so many different languages. So they are people bound to switch between different languages when they speak more than one languages that are different from another. So these people who speak more than one language will have tendency to mix different sentences or words from different languages or switch languages and communicating. So it mostly happens when you speak more than one language, so it is bound that you will speak between one language to another within the same sentence or paragraphs. This phenomenon occurs for multiple reasons, but some studies found that language switching and mixing may have an impact on our social interaction and the relationships between speakers. So language mixing and code switching can have an effect of how relationship will work and how social interaction will be perceived. Dunanik et al. In 2055 stated that occurrence of code switching will reveal the various fluids of the conversation, and the occurrence of code switching plays a crucial role in identifying the position of the speaker. When teaching foreign language like English subject in Indonesia, this phenomenon is very apparent. So it is very common in Indonesia, for example, for English teacher to speak both Indonesian and English within the class. So the formulation of the problem. So language mixing and code switching is common occurrence of people who speak from more than one language. So everyone who speaks more than one language will eventually switch between language to one and another. So in the classroom, it may be less noticeable when there are many factors such as gestures, tone, indication, and many more. So it is language and mixing significance may not be very apparent when in the face-to-face classroom. So we need to see it from the virtual space where there is less factors that's affecting social interaction. This could, such as the gestures. For example, when you're chatting with your friends, you cannot see what your friends are moving, what your friends are intending with the tone of the message. So we have to. So I will have to research from the virtual space aspect. So these are the questions that I seek to aim for this research. The first is, does gender influence someone's perception toward language mixing and code switching interaction? And then does age influence someone's perception towards language mixing and code switching in an interaction? And then how does language mixing and switching affect whether it is in positive or negative way? And then the frequency of language mixing, because if there is too rare of language mixing, we cannot really tell how many influence that the language mixing and code switching will affect the social interaction. And lastly is the relationships between the participants and the interaction of the perception about language mixing and code switching. So the literature through many scholars such as Ahmad and Nana et al. In 2022 and Baker in 2027, basically it is concluded that language mixing and code switching is just simply a phenomenon or occurrence where someone speaks more than one language, to speak more than one language, switch between one language to another within conversation. And because of that, code switching and mixing are very common phenomena in second language learning environments between teachers and students, such as in English for foreign language class. For teachers, this communication strategy is used in areas such as providing new learning experiences, change topic, translation, evaluation, and comprehension. So basically, many studies has found that language switching and mixing have an impact on social interaction and how it will turn out in classroom. However, all of these studies, such as the one from Prof and Prof in Villa and Trust and Stockwell, they are all conducted in offline environment, so it is face-to-face environment. However, because we are more prone to online interaction nowadays due to the pandemic, we have to cut out all of these factors that is present in face-to-face interaction, such as gestures, tones, indications, and many more. Next, please. The methodology. The research utilizes qualitative analysis to find common ideas regarding the language mixing and code switching phenomenon to determine whether its influence is significant or not during an interaction. So ELT teacher can understand whether applying this phenomenon during class is better or not. So this research will mainly use qualitative research, mainly to explain and describe the phenomenon between an occurrence that happens naturally, and this occurrence will be language mixing and code switching. The process from investigations taken from qualitative research can determine the shapes, characteristics, relationships, and similarities, activities, and changes and difference between the phenomenon of one and to another. So for examples, there are 20 random samples taken from their experience when having language conversation from people who are different, who have more than the same language in an online interaction. So the question covers topics such as how common it is for them to mix and switch language, how common their friends mix and switch language, and who does it more often, whether the speaker or their friends. And there are also the type of speakers from monolinguals, bilinguals, or multilingual. There are two parts of the questionnaire. The first part is about themselves, and the second part is about their friends. And at the end of both parts, there are open-ended questions about whether they notice any changes from their speaking partner when they mix and switch language, asked to find the reasoning and the reason for why they change languages, or whether it affects them in any way or whatsoever. So this research was first intended as a mixed response research between quantitative and qualitative. However, due to the time restrict, I will only explain the qualitative descriptively. So out of the questions above, gender and age seems to play a little role in switching and mixing and the relation with social interaction. And they all give the same response equally. So no matter whether you are female or male, the answers that they give, they are both equal, in that the one who answers positively or negatively have the same amount ratio between male and female. So it seems that age doesn't really affect how you perceive language mixing and code switching during social interaction. This also applies to age. Although their age range between from 14 to 20, they all have a very common answer. So it seems that age also does not influence language switching or mixing that much. The next is most of the language switching and mixing were done by multilinguals. So monolinguals, although they do mix and switch, they don't do it out of genuine intention. For example, multilinguals speak language, switch or mix language because they do it because they know this language. However, for monolinguals, they only do it to follow their friends or just as playing around. So mixing and switching rarely happen on average, but they do have noticeable impact. So even though language mixing and switching very rarely happen between their interactions, it affects people and influence how their perception towards interaction and conversation very greatly. So it, without many other factors such as gestures and tone indication, it seems that language mixing and switching do have a greater impact than face-to-face interaction. And lastly is that many of the participant answers that language mixing and code switching trigger their motivation and interest in speaking the language that the other party was using. So, but however, there are some who says they feel excluded when their friends speak in different language during their conversation. So, although it can incite exclusivity, most of the time it invites other people to speak the same language of their own language that they use during language switching and mixing. So this exclusivity can turn into inclusivity. Next, please. So in conclusion, language mixing and switching have more noticeable impact on social interactors, but it has limited factors. Age and gender also does not seem to factor very much in perception towards language mixing and switching during a social interaction. As factors such as tones that could indicate or display emotion and expressions are not present. This means that linguistic structure will become more noticeable and highlighted in order to grasp the meaning of what the speakers tries to convey. As such, language mixing and switching will also be more noticeable and maybe become the focus of the topic when you compared to when you talk face to face. You might also not realize that there was language mixing when you were talking face to face, as there are many factors that disperse this focus. This is also why language switching and mixing are not that common, as they understood that it will be noticeable and become conscious about how it will affect the way of conversations will unfold as they realize the effect of language switching and mixing. Speakers become more careful in using language switching and mixing and mostly do it only to those who speak the same language that they say. And for the suggestion, based on the conclusion above, it is safe to assume that language mixing and code switching in English language switching should be paid more attention to as it is part of social interaction. The first one is teachers should be mindful in switching or mixing language. They cannot speak one language only in order to initiate engagement, as teachers who only speak native language will not be able to rely on the linguistic depth of English, and teachers who only use English would confuse students even more, as many terms need to be explained and translated. So it is not proper to only speak in one language when teaching, because many factors will contribute to students' motivation when you switch or mix language. However, teachers it is not advised to mix or switch language often. Many teachers, for example, they do not switch our language completely, so many of the language they switch can happen 3 or 4 times within sentences. This will confuse the students, as they will have to translate languages quickly and they are not used to doing so. Teachers also cannot use complicated or advanced vocabulary too often, as it will throw off the students, especially children who learn English as second or third language. So teachers should use common language when switching between the two languages in order to not confuse students with language that they do not understand yet. That is all for my presentation. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.